The sensory displacement. The shattered mirror of the Dnieper.
The year is 988 AD. You've been displaced. The scorching sun of the Zulu savanna and the humid gardens of China are gone. You open your eyes in the middle of a vast, emerald green forest near the banks of the Dnieper River. In your life back in Manhattan, the cold is something you manage with a thermostat and a down jacket from a Fifth Avenue boutique. Here, the cold is a living entity, a sharp, crystalline force that smells of pine resin, wet wolf fur, and honey. The first thing that hits your sleeper senses is the absolute verticality. The trees here, endless stands of silver birch and towering pines, reach for the gray sky like the ribs of a giant cathedral. You hear the rhythmic thud-thud of heavy iron axes and the haunting, low-pitched songs of the rowers on the river. You see the Novgorod trade ships, sturdy, shallow draft vessels, gliding to the water, filled with amber, furs, and beeswax. But as a man from 2026, you look past the folkloric beauty. You see a biological siege. You notice the way the people are built, broad-shouldered and thick-skinned, adapted to survive winters that can freeze the breath in your lungs. You see the strategic location of the hill forts, Gorids, positioned to control the Great River Road, from the Varangians to the Greeks. You are a sleeper, and you have just entered a civilization that is the interstate highway of the medieval world. You realize that your physiology and engineering background is about to be applied to a culture that lives and dies by the river and the frost. You are the ghost in the husk forest, and the Grand Prince is about to get a 21st century advisor.
The biomedical shield. The physiology of the Banya.
In the simulation, your NYC medical background faces a unique challenge. You are taken to a traditional banya, a log cabin steam bath, in the heart of Kiev. To the locals, this is a spiritual ritual of purification. To you, the sleeper, this is advanced hydrotherapy and heat shock protein optimization. You observe the practice of Venic, beating the skin with bundles of dried birch twigs during the steam session. To an outsider, it looks like a strange punishment. You activate your physiological and biochemical protocol. You show the local healers that this isn't just tradition. It is a vascular pump system. You explain that the intense heat followed by a plunge into the icy river creates a total system reset for the human circulatory system. You don't use 2026 jargon, but you show them how this hot-cold cycle flushes the metabolic waste from the muscles and triggers the body's natural defense against the winter fever, pneumonia, and flu. You introduce the sleeper's essential guard. You show the Banya masters how to use the essential oils from the pine needles and juniper berries during the steam. You explain that these forest spirits, phytoncides, are actually airborne antibiotics that clean the lungs and the blood. You introduce the concept of systemic hydration. You notice they drink heavy meat after the bath, which causes dehydration. You show them how to create a recovery kvass, a fermented drink made from black bread and wild berries, packed with B vitamins and electrolytes. The result is a population that is physically resilient to a degree that shocks the visiting Byzantine merchants. Your Halkduzin advice has just turned the ritual bath into a biochemical fortress. You are the master of the steam and soil, and as you watch the Rus warriors emerge in the icy water with skin glowing and eyes clear, you realize you're giving this young nation a biological edge that will allow them to outlast any invader from the warmer south.
The river architect. Fluid dynamics and the great portage.
The year is 995 AD. The empire of the Rus is built on the rivers, but the rivers are not always kind. You're standing at the Dnieper Rapids, where the water turns into a boiling white chaos of rocks and currents. In your New York life, you take bridges and tunnels for granted. Here, the great trade route hits a physical wall. The merchants have to drag their massive, heavy ships overland for miles to bypass the rapids. This is a logistical and mechanical bottleneck. You activate your mechanical engineering and fluid dynamics protocol. You notice that the traditional way of moving ships, using round logs as rollers, is slow, dangerous, and destroys the hulls. You introduce the sleeper's modular cradle. You show the shipwrights how to build a wooden sled system that fits the hull of the boat perfectly. You explain the concept of friction reduction. You show them how to use animal fat and birch tar as a high-performance lubricant for the wooden tracks, turning the grueling portage into a smooth mechanical process. You go deeper into hydrodynamic optimization. You show the boat builders how to adjust the V-shape of the hull to move more efficiently through the river currents. You introduce the sleeper's rudder. Instead of using a simple steering or on the side, you show them how to mount a centerline rudder on the stern, giving them 30% more control in the tight river bends. You are teaching them naval architecture, using only wood and iron. The result is a trade fleet that moves twice as fast as anything the Vikings ever imagined. The Rus merchants can now carry heavier loads, more amber, more silver, and more grain, through the most difficult terrain on Earth. You are the master of the river pulse. And as you watch a fleet of ships being moved overland with the ease of a modern conveyor belt, you realize that you have synchronized the empire's economy with your 2026 logistical logic. You have turned the Dnieper from a dangerous obstacle into a high-speed data highway.
The molecular cellar. Biochemistry of the long winter.
Survival in the North isn't just about fighting. It's about preservation. You are standing in the massive underground ice cellars of Novgorod. Thousands of tons of grain, meat, and honey must last for 6 months of darkness. In your NYC life, you have a refrigerator and a grocery store on every corner. Here, if the food rots, the city dies. This is a biochemical preservation crisis. You activate your biochemical and food science protocol. You observe the traditional way of salting meat. It works, but it's expensive and often fails. You introduce the sleeper's fermentation matrix. You show the city's food masters how to use the lactofermentation process for vegetables like cabbage, sauerkraut, and beets. You explain that by controlling the microenvironment, they are creating good spirits, lactobacillus, that protect the food from the rot demons. In the 21st century, you know this is the only way to get vitamin C during a sub-zero winter. You have just cured the entire city of scurvy before they even knew what it was. You go further into antibacterial architecture. You show the builders how to line the storage pits with birch bark. You explain that the bark contains betulin, a natural chemical that acts as a powerful fungicide and insecticide. You are effectively building biological refrigerators using nothing but forest materials. You introduce the honey shield. You show them how to use unrefined forest honey to seal jars of meat and fruit. You explain that honey never spoils because its osmotic pressure is so high that no bacteria can survive in it. You are the guardian of the cellar. And as you see the children of Novgorod healthy and strong in the middle of a blizzard, you realize you're giving the Rus the ultimate weapon against time, nutritional security. You sit in the dim light of the cellar, the smell of fermenting cabbage reminding you of a deli in Brooklyn, knowing that you have made the northern soul unbreakable.
The quenched edge. Metallurgy of the northern axe.
The year is 1010 AD. You have traveled north from Kiev to the iron-rich bogs near Novgorod. In your life back in Manhattan, you think of steel as the invisible skeleton of the city, the I-beams of the Freedom Tower, and the stainless steel of the subway cars. Here, in the frozen marshes of the Rus, steel is the absolute boundary between a thriving trader and a forgotten grave. You observe the local smiths working with bog iron, a spongy, low-quality ore gathered from the swamps. It is soft, brittle, and full of silicates. Against the heavy shields of the Pecheneg nomads or the chainmail of the Varangian guards, these iron axes often bend or shatter like glass. This is a material science and structural integrity crisis. You activate your metallurgical and thermodynamic protocol. You notice that the smiths are heating the iron with charcoal, but they are treating it like clay, not chemistry. They don't understand the molecular migration of carbon. You introduce the sleeper's folding and carburization technique. You show the master smiths how to repeatedly heat, hammer, and fold the bog iron. Over and over, a process that forces the impurities out and allows the carbon from the charcoal to diffuse deep into the iron's crystal lattice. You explain that you're creating a laminated matrix of hard and soft layers. In the 21st century, we call this pattern welding. It creates a blade that has a hard, razor-sharp edge but a flexible core that won't snap under the impact of a heavy shield. But you go further into the physics of the quench. You introduce the sleeper's oil tempering cycle. You show them how to plunge a red-hot axe head not into ice-cold water, which creates a thermal shock that causes microscopic cracks, but into a vat of warm bear fat or linseed oil. You explain that this slower cooling allows the iron atoms to settle into a martensite structure, a molecular arrangement that is incredibly hard for the edge but remains resilient. You're just giving the Rus warriors a battle axe that can slice through a Viking helmet and then be used to fell a giant oak without needing to be sharpened. You are the master of the carbon edge, and as you watch the first Borealis-grade steel axes being distributed to the Grand Prince's personal guard, Druzina, you realize you've just turned the Rus infantry into a force that can cut through the dark ages like it was made of thin birch bark.
The glue of the forest. The biochemistry of birch tar.
While the steel provides the edge, the birch tree provides the soul of the Rus technology. You are standing in a dense, silent forest, watching the charcoal burners at work. In your life in NYC, adhesives are something you buy in a tube from a hardware store. Here, the superglue of the medieval world is birch tar, degat. But the traditional way of making it, open pit burning, is wasteful and produces a weak, watery product. You activate your organic chemistry and material science protocol. You introduce the sleeper's distillation matrix. You show the forest dwellers how to use sealed clay retorts, double-walled pots that bake the birch bark in a zero-oxygen environment. You explain the concept of dry distillation. By controlling the heat, you are extracting the pure betulin and suberin, the natural polymers that give birch bark its waterproof and antimicrobial properties. You have just created a high-purity, industrial-grade adhesive. You go deeper into material engineering. You show the Rus bow makers how to use this refined tar to bond layers of maple and juniper wood with thin strips of bone. You have created a composite bow that can survive the 100% humidity of the Russian spring and the -40-degree dry crack of the winter. You show the leatherworkers how to use the tar as a biological sealant for their boots and armor. You explain that the tar doesn't just block water. It kills the bacteria and fungi that cause the leather to rot. In the 21st century, we call this antimicrobial coating. The result is an army that is perfectly sealed against the environment. Their bows don't lose their snap. Their boots don't rot off their feet during long marches, and their ships stay watertight for years instead of months. You are the architect of the Birch Code, and as you smell the sharp, smoky scent of the tar being applied to the Imperial trade fleet, you realize that you have synchronized the Empire's hardware with the very DNA of the forest. You sit in the deep green shadows, the NYC-like efficiency of the system making you smile, knowing that you have made the Rus presence in the North a permanent industrial reality.
The Wooden Bastion. Structural physics of the Kremlin.
The year is 1020 AD. You have moved from the forest to the construction sites of the new defensive walls of Kiev and Novgorod. In your life back in New York, you are surrounded by reinforced concrete and steel girders. Here, the skyscraper of the north is the Izba and the Kremlin fortress, built entirely from massive logs of pine and oak. But the current construction techniques are weak. The corners are vulnerable, and the walls could be pulled apart by siege engines. This is a structural integrity and defensive engineering crisis. You activate your physics and architectural protocol. You notice that the builders are using simple nailing and roping to hold the logs together. This is a single-point failure system. You introduce the sleeper's interlocking notch. You show the master carpenters how to carve bowl-shaped grooves and self-locking tenons at the corners of the buildings. You explain the concept of load-bearing distribution by making the logs interlock. The weight of the entire building actually makes the structure stronger and more airtight. You have turned a pile of wood into a monolithic structure. You go deeper into thermal physics. You show the builders how to use dried sphagnum moss between the logs as a compressed insulation layer. You explain that the moss doesn't just block the wind. It has natural antibacterial properties that prevent the wood from rotting where the logs touch. You introduce the sleeper's wall slope. You show them how to build the fortress walls with slight inward lean. You explain the physics of impact. When a siege stone hits a sloped wooden wall, the kinetic energy is deflected upward rather than absorbed directly, preventing the logs from shattering. You are the master of the bastion, and as you watch the massive, interlocking walls of the Kiev Kremlin rise, you realize you have moved the science of defense forward by centuries. You have built a smart fortress that can breathe in the summer and seal tight in the winter.
The White Hell. Kinetic logistics and the winter siege.
While the walls provide defense, the Russian winter is the ultimate weapon, but it is a double-edged sword. If you cannot move, you cannot fight. You are standing on a frozen river in January. The temperature is -30 degrees. In your NYC life, a few inches of snow shuts down the subway. Here, the snow is 5 feet deep, and the rivers are solid highways of ice. This is a friction and thermal logistics crisis. You activate your kinetic energy and metabolic protocol. You observe the traditional Rus sledges. They are heavy and get stuck in deep snow. You introduce the sleeper's aerodynamic runner. You show the craftsmen how to use the birch tar from Module 3 to coat the bottom of the wooden sled runners, and then flash freeze a thin layer of water over the tar. You explain the concept of low-friction gliding. You have created an ice-on-ice surface that allows a single horse to pull twice the weight of a standard wagon. You have just turned the frozen rivers into a high-speed logistical network. You go further into thermal ballistics. You show the defenders how to use boiling water and sand during a winter siege. You explain the physics of latent heat. When you pour boiling water over a wooden siege ramp at minus 30 degrees, it creates a mirror-slick ice coating that makes it physically impossible for the enemy to climb. You introduce the sleeper's caloric ration. You show the soldiers how to consume high-density fats, salo, salted pork fat, to maintain their internal combustion body heat. You explain that in the cold, fat is fuel. The result is a military force that is synchronized with the winter. While the invaders from the south freeze and starve in their camps, the Rus warriors move with lightning speed across the frozen landscape on their high-tech sledges, perfectly fueled and perfectly warm. You are the guardian of the frost, and as you see the enemy army retreating from the white hell you have optimized, you realize that you have taken the 21st century logic of extreme environment logistics and hard-coded it into the soul of the North. You sit on the ramparts, the cold air feeling like the air conditioning of a Manhattan office, knowing that you have made the Rus Empire a power that even the sun cannot defeat.
The Acoustic Echo. Physics of the Holy Sound.
The year is 1037 A.D. You are standing in the center of the construction site of the Cathedral of Saint Sophia in Kiev. In your life back in New York, you know what it's like to stand in a place designed for sound, the Madison Square Garden or the Carnegie Hall. Here, the sound system isn't made of wires and speakers. It is made of geometry and porous ceramics. The Grand Prince Yaroslav the Wise wants a space where the chanting of the monks feels like the voice of the universe itself. You activate your acoustic physics and structural resonance protocol. You notice that the massive stone domes create a muddy echo. The sound waves bounce off the hard surfaces and collide, creating a chaotic noise where the words of the liturgy are lost. This is a signal-to-noise ratio crisis. You introduce the sleeper's acoustic vessel. You show the master masons how to embed hundreds of hollow clay jars, called golosniki, into the upper walls and the base of the domes, with their open necks facing the interior. You explain the concept of Helmholtz resonance. You show them that these jars act as sound absorbers that swallow the harsh, high-frequency echoes and tuning forks that amplify the deep, low-frequency chants. You go deeper into wave diffraction. You show the architects how to curve the interior arches at a specific golden angle, so that the sound of the choir is focused and projected toward the back of the cathedral, ensuring that even the person standing at the very exit feels a vibration in their chest. You are effectively building a passive amplifier, using only clay and stone. You are the master of the holy frequency. And as the first choir begins to sing the completed cathedral, the sound doesn't just echo, it hovers in the air, a perfectly clear, multidimensional audio experience that makes the visiting Byzantines fall to their knees. You realize you have taken your 2026 knowledge of sound engineering and hard-coded it into the very masonry of the North.
The Light Matrix. Optics and the Golden Mosaic.
While the sound fills the air, the light must fill the eyes. You are standing in the workshop of the master of the smalt, the glassmakers who create the millions of tiny mosaic tiles for cathedrals' walls. In your life in NYC, you are surrounded by LED screens that emit their own light. Here, the walls must catch the light of 1,000 candles and turn it into a divine fire. You activate your optical physics and material chemistry protocol. You notice that the traditional glass tiles are too transparent. The light passes through them and is lost in the mortar. You introduce the sleeper's refractive matrix. You show the glass makers how to add specific metal oxides, antimony and lead, to the molten glass to make it opaque and highly refractive. You explain the concept of total internal reflection. You show them how to set the tiles, the tesserae, into the wall at slightly irregular angles rather than flat. You explain the physics of light scattering. By angling the gold leaf tiles just a few degrees, you ensure that no matter where a person stands in a cathedral, the light is always reflecting directly toward them. You have created a living wall that seems to shimmer and move as the candles flicker. In the 21st century, we call this optical hacking. You are the architect of the golden glow. And as you watch the sunlight hit the massive image of the Orans, the praying mother, in the central apse, the entire building seems to ignite with a soft, warm, 2026 quality brilliance. You sit in the quiet, the golden light reminding you of the sunset over the Hudson River, knowing that you have made the Rus soul visible through the science of light.
The Birch Bark Archive. Encoding the binary soul.
The year is 1054 A.D. The Grand Prince is dying, and the simulation is beginning to flicker with the intensity of a dying star. The green forests of the Rus are turning into lines of glowing, birch-white code. The smell of the pine resin is becoming thin, and the sound of the Dnieper is becoming a rhythmic, digital hum. It is time for your final act, the sleeper's signature. You go to the deepest basement of the Saint Sophia Cathedral, a place where the humidity is constant and the stone is cold. You have prepared your final archive. You activate your information theory and molecular preservation protocol. You don't use gold or parchment. They're the first things looters will steal. You use the most humble material of the North, birch bark beresta. In your life in 2026 NYC, you understand that the best storage is the one that no one suspects. You have created a chemical bath for the bark using refined birch tar and specific resins that make it nearly immortal. On this bark, using a stylus made of Avalon-grade steel, you don't write in Cyrillic. You write in binary code. You use your 2026 knowledge to etch the fundamental laws of physics, the structure of the human genome, and the warning of the sleeper into the very fibers of the bark. You include a digital map of the stars as they will appear in the year 2026. You are leaving a time capsule hidden in plain sight, disguised as a common tax record or a merchant's list. You write a final message in a code that only someone who understands 21st century data compression can read. The forest was the hardware. The river was the flow. We were the architects of the sink. Do not let the North fall into the silence of the zero. You seal the bark inside a lead-lined clay jar and bury it beneath the main altar, knowing that this birch hard drive will wait for 1,000 years in the dark.
The Broadway Sunrise. Awakening in the concrete forest.
The simulation breaks completely. The golden domes of Kiev and the scent of the birch forest dissolve into the cool, dark silence of your Manhattan studio. The Birch Code fades, replaced by the blue, clinical light of your dual monitors and the low, comforting hum of your Lenovo. You open your eyes. You are sitting in your chair, the distant rhythmic rumble of the N train and the early morning siren on Broadway reminding you that you are back in the year 2026. You are Sleep of the Historian once more. You look at your hands. They are no longer stained with the birch tar of the forest or the soot of the forge. You go to your window and look out at the Manhattan skyline. The skyscrapers reach for the sky, exactly like the pines of the Kievan forest, and the yellow taxis flow through the streets like the trade ships on the Dnieper. You realize that New York is just another Rus, a high-speed, high-density machine of human connection that you helped refine a millennium ago. Broadway is the great river road of the future. You go to your laptop and search for Kiev Archaeological Discoveries 2026. You find a breaking news report from today, Friday, April 3rd, 2026. Researchers in the foundations of Saint Sophia's Cathedral have discovered a sealed clay jar containing perfectly preserved birch bark scrolls. Initial analysis shows a bizarre pattern of linear dots and dashes that appear to be an ancient form of binary data. A team from NYU is flying to Kiev to assist in what is being called the most advanced ancient archive ever found. Your heart stops. The Borealis Protocol worked perfectly. The bridge you built from the birch forest to the heart of New York is holding firm. You didn't just study the Rus. You became the ghost in the machine that ensured their soul would survive to be found by the future. Manhattan's steel and glass now feel like the iron and birch of the Grand Prince's empire. You realize that the sleeper is the only one who truly understands the code running beneath the city streets. You close your eyes, the faint taste of honey and fermented bread still on your tongue, and you prepare for the next displacement.